Warning: the following video essay contains scenes of violence and gore, and also spoils the entirety of the Callisto Protocol. Enter at your own risk. Thank you. The Callisto Protocol does a lot right. It kinda has to. It has pedigree, money, and a strong and talented workforce. It's a product that's had people in its corner from the moment it was announced. Unfortunately, it stumbled at the starting block. Came out too early. Pushed too far and too fast for an immutable winter release. Rightfully afraid of the Dead Space remake, I'd say. It's marred with issues, gameplay, story, and development, all to be highlighted in this following essay. And yet I struggle to hate it. When I do, it's fun. This explosion of joyous anger aimed at a faceless corporation. We see a resurgence of this rage when a new big-budget game comes out. They can never deliver. But have they ever? Well, yeah, of course they have. But we can all feel it. The constant expansion of the video game industry is slowly winding down. The companies we were once fans of have turned cruel, hungry, and indifferent to criticism. I see it every day. Mid-budget games are dying. Small companies are being consumed by huge conglomerates. The endpoint of video games will be exactly the same as the endpoint of film. This is why the Callisto Protocol is important. It takes a bet that few others would ever be willing to take. The $100 million new IP. Such a gamble is insane. I can't remember a time in my lived history where it ever paid off. When I think back to when I was a child, the first image that comes to my mind is my bedroom. A boxy, quiet room. Large window to the east. There might as well have been a wall for all the gazing I did out of it. My wardrobe, my bed, my television, and my Xbox. I don't remember the lessons, how to algebra, how to science, or how to speak French. But I do remember the video games. I remember an old game store on the nearby high street. I remember giant boxes with the Oblivion logo emblazoned on the front, stacked high above the countertop. The aisles and aisles of games. Too many for any one child to play. It was called Eclipse. I remember begging my parents for new games monthly. New Call of Duty, new Dark Souls, new Battlefield, and new Halo. Large releases. Each fulfilled my hunger for distractions. They helped me bond with the few friends I had, and to forget the difficulty of growing up. It's these games that define the childhoods of most of us here. But COD didn't start out with a budget of $160 million. The first Battlefield wasn't a bank breaker either. These companies are still around because they've successfully balanced a generation of wealth in a fashion that would make Walt Disney blush. I hate big companies, but some are smarter than others. Krafton are the publishers and the PUBG people. Krafton are idiots. The Callisto Protocol cost about $160 million to make, not including the marketing, which I have no doubt cost millions in and of itself. To drop $160 million on a brand new, unproven IP. Well, Glenn must have had one hell of a pitch. Our local Eclipse store is dead now, by the way. Replaced with an unknown shop on a constantly decaying street. It died. Much like my desire to buy big-name, big-budget games. The Callisto Protocol is admittedly a rarity for me. It's a lot of money for me to spend. Money that I would rather spend on someone or something else. But I eventually caved. Committed a sin I swore never to commit again. Even though I bought Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2.2 the very same year. And the Battle Pass. I had problems. I read up on the hype. Watched the ads, the IGN interviews, and a series simply called Mastering Horror. I am a man who is easily scared. Horror games hold the least amount of real estate within both my Steam library and achievements list. I've never actually beaten one before. I probably never will. And by horror games I mean, the real scary stuff. The game's designed to be primarily fearful experiences. Not a Dead Rising or a Back 4 Blood. Although Dead Rising scared the crap out of me back in the day. You should go watch Mastering Horror for yourself. It's a real interesting piece to analyze. If you actually want to learn about how to structure a horror film or game, look somewhere else, please. There are 1,000 better ways to learn. They brought in a smorgasbord of horror industry veterans to discuss what a true horror experience actually is. Let's round them up because it's important to my point here. The Newton brothers are a pair of incredibly competent and talented composers who have been working in film and TV for a very long time. With nearly 90 or so works under their belt, a large portion of their discography consists of horror media. They have, as far as I'm aware, zero experience in the video game industry. Next up is Sean Cunningham, another film industry legend. This time the producer of many a film you may have heard of, being a producer for the Friday the 13th cinematic universe, ranging from the 1980s original all the way to Jason X, a film only worthy of the bin. Robert Kirkman made The Walking Dead, Invincible, and Battle Pope. He's a legend who needs no introductions. He's the guy who was integral to the time that I call the Zombified 2000s. Remember when everything was zombies? Yeah, this is one of the guys to blame for that. Or rather thank, because, zombies are cool. Finally, Tom Savini. He's an everything man, working on a massive amount of fantastic films. He does so many things that I just can't bundle them all up here. So these gentlemen and many others, including a psychologist, were paid to perform a roundtable about horror media. It would be a great insight into the game's creation, and in some regards it is. Unfortunately, none of these big names actually worked on the game itself. It's to be expected, of course, but I can't be the only person who thought they actually brought their talent to the table. The show is framed as a conversation between these veterans and the viewer. It's constantly using TCP concept art to illustrate their very competent analysis. It's always drawing a line from this analysis back to the game, even if the point being made is just about horror in general, pitched by someone with zero relation to the actual video game at all. Of course, there were real devs who participated. They're the most entertaining of the lot, allowing us to actually see behind the curtain. When the real devs talk about the game they made, you can see the passion they hold in their hearts. When Kirkman talks about horror, it's in the most vague, most basic terms possible. Do people actually fall for this kind of stuff? Just hire some famous people. Famous equals always correct and never wrong. This guy really says,
theater to watch a movie, you're experiencing someone else's story.
That quote is all you need to know about this series. It's basic. Films and games are intrinsically linked, bound by the hip with a rope hewn from the ancient discourse to whether or not video games are art. Film is the closest thing we can compare video games to when arguing for their validity. So conventional wisdom would state what works for film would also work for games. When we draw the art comparison to film, we are attempting to build a bridge, a logical path using something old like film to justify something new like video games. Film is an accepted form of art. You don't even question it. But it wasn't always this way. It was poems, plays, then books, film, TV, and now, finally, video games. To tie video games to film with such sincerity is a dangerous road. Is there like a scale of video game gaminess that goes from like the original Doom all the way to a game like Her Story, a game that is entirely based on full motion video? And are these games worse off because they share more with cinema than they do with Halo 3? Is The Last of Us actually a true blue video game? Or is it just an interactive TV show? Perfectly linear, with clear lines between gameplay and narrative. A whole lot of cutscenes, then gameplay. We all know The Last of Us is a fantastic game, pretty much universally loved. I'm not saying anything otherwise, honest. But there's a question that always appears when I think about this sort of thing. Do people enjoy games like The Last of Us or God of War because they're fantastic video games? Or do they like them because they're structured shockingly similar to film? And is there even a difference? Is it just a coincidence that the new Last of Us TV show has done as well as it has? It's a conversation that I'm very interested in having, mostly because I don't really have an answer to its question. It is in my opinion that the reason For me, the Callisto Protocol fails at horror, for me, is because it's using film to define its scares. Taking everything popular, and therefore played out from horror cinema. It's jump scares. TCP only contains jump scares. Nothing changes. An endless queue of loud noises and sudden startles. I want to have it known that I'm biased. I hate jump scares. I think they're cheap, and as a man who feels genuine pain when a loud noise blasts out, this game makes me hate it by default. Jump scares can work. They do work. And I like them when they are subversive or fully self-aware. I want to jump, then laugh about it. The film pointing and laughing with me. As we both recognize that whilst a jump scare may be cheap by nature, the honest feelings are not. I don't want to be battered by them. I don't want to jump, then get angry about it. But when the shock is over, the Callisto Protocol gives you all the power in the world. You're invincible. Always empowered, never weak, never on the back foot. When a monster appears, you don't run, you don't hide, you don't stumble. You grab a weapon and go to war. Once again, they made a movie called Mastering Horror. The Callisto Protocol kinda sucks, but this isn't a damning statement. Other games kinda suck too. Films kinda suck, but even bad or middling art has value, and most media can be saved in the sequel, which the Callisto Protocol is most likely getting. I found myself writing and rewriting this video, watching reviews, listening to essays, looking back at Dead Space, and enjoying every step of this video's creation. However, despite my apprehensions and denigrations, I'm still thinking about the game and what its existence actually means to me. A game like this has to have value, but how do we measure it? If we were to use currency by hour to measure this game's quality, it would fail spectacularly. I don't particularly enjoy using it as a way of determining a thing's worth, but it's useful enough for now. It's a way of thinking that was spawned from a capitalist desire to optimize time and the purchase of product. When labor is sold, time not spent working has a value that is indefinable. People pay for microtransactions. They want things to speed up. They want to feel good now because many of us have enough money, but zero time. No retail veteran wants to waste their money, especially when work is rarely fun. It's the same reason why valueless DLC and grindy free-to-play models are so egregious. Every action shakes the bars. There's no guarantee that a game's going to be around forever, even for a few years. Skins and currency and battle passes operate on a preconceived notion that the game's going to last a while. But every game has a death day, and when that day comes, what's going to happen to our skins then? Not every purchase has to be a lifetime investment, obviously. There's 100 games I'll never play again, but I'm happy for their existence. But the Callisto Protocol cost me 50 quid. That's like 60, 70 bucks. And when the credits closed for the first time, an eerie feeling settled over me. Like a heavy blanket of anxiety. I wanted my money back. As living and gaming are getting more and more expensive, the Callisto Protocol is a week's worth of food for a lot of people. My first playthrough ended at the 5-hour and 55-minute mark. 10% of this game's actual value. I did this on its hardest difficulty, and whilst exploring as much as possible. This time will go up with the addition of New Game Plus and a harder difficulty. But as of now, all I can do is play again. Play again I did. I could barely finish my second playthrough. Unfortunately, New Game Plus and the hardest difficulty have unskippable cutscenes. It was at my first cutscene I realized I had absolutely zero desire to continue. I have absolutely no idea where this game's $160 million budget went. For comparison, The Last of Us 2 was estimated at $150 million. I lied, by the way. I actually kinda do know where the money went. Take a guess. Dev costs, right? Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's take a look at the credits. The Callisto Protocol's true credits. It's a list of everyone who's worked alongside Striking Distance. 1,392 individuals. Why does this game need 1,000 developers? Thanks to TJ McWeaksauce on Reddit for showing us this horror show. 160 million spent. That's absurd, right? Like, comparing it to The Last of Us again, that game had 1,292 devs. Slightly more devs, less money spent, and a game that's double the length. Like, what is happening here? Channel Requires DLC made a godlike video on the matter. Links in the description like always. If I could put the entire video into mine, I would. To sum it up in no small terms, the reason the Callisto Protocol cost so much to make was the culmination of 100 different factors, many of which are speculative. But there's a fantastically strong case to be made for the last minute story change. Striking Distance convinced Krafton to distance the project from PUBG after player backlash. But they couldn't change everything with the short amount of time they had. Like the commonality, the Illuminati-like villains. They were ripped straight from PUBG with few changes. They have a similar fit and identical motto, Vir Solitarius, or The Survivor. These kind of rewrites destroy the pace of a game's development, ballooning the cost and forcing developers into crunch. Something that Glenn did glorify, but eventually apologized for after he got dragged. Of course, this rewrite isn't the only reason things are so expensive. After doing my research and comparing TCP to a ton of other expensive games, I still have concerns about where all the money actually went. No doubt this game was expensive, but a $160 million game, this is not. But I want to believe that my existence outside of this game, the time spent thinking, spent writing, spent watching all of these rants and reviews, have given me insight into how this game still has fans. Very passionate and very loud fans. I've taken a particular fascination with those who share my economic bracket, but value their time a lot more than I do. Small-time YouTubers who most likely work a normal job as well. I've seen people call this game the most hated game of 2022. I've seen people say everything, compare it to every other survival horror game imaginable, and make every defense measured or ridiculous. Watching the discourse around the Callisto Protocol is so entertaining to me. And no, not in that I like to watch people get angry kind of way. I'm seeing so many people flock to this game's defense. Like it's a human whose feelings can be hurt. So passionate about this game I wanted to like but never could. And I almost feel left out. They are happy with the experience given. To them, it was a groundbreaking new IP, survival horror redefined. These kind of people's passions amaze me. The ones who notice the small things. The ones that take their time and the ones that rage quit when faced with difficult odds. They are the people I used to be. The young me. Sat in his boxy, windowless room, playing video games unflinchingly, 10 hours a day. I sincerely wish I could be enthusiastic about this. He has everything he needs to succeed. So why is he failing? Current studies have shown the Callisto Protocol hasn't made his money back yet. It's just another incomplete release we see year by year. I mentioned before about just how much of a risk this game actually is. Well, I found a release presentation that came out recently. One that's really interesting. It goes through a ton of Krafton's IPs with timelines, NFT plans, and the future of PUBG. It also contains a small amount of information about the Callisto Protocol. Right here. The Callisto Protocol is a quadruple A game. That's right, folks. 4 A's. So the terms AAA and AA and stuff like that are taken from the financial world. The more A's, the more likely for a return in investment. Call of Duty is a AAA game, not because it has a big budget, but because it has a massive, passionate consumer base. To make a COD game is to print money. But a game like, let's say, a new IP, with zero relation to any other existing work, in a brand new, untested gameplay style, and with a budget of 160 million. That isn't a quadruple A game or even a triple A game. That's a negative A game. At least they hit the release date. Alright, so we're going to go through the story as fast as possible, recap it, and talk about its themes and stuff like that. Jacob and his co-pilot Max, who you will forget about, are taking a shipment of alien parasites disguised as boxes of medicine from Europa to Callisto. Jacob knew that this was a suspicious haul to make, but decided to do it anyways, as the United Jupiter Company, or UJC, who also own their ship, the UJC Charon, offered them both enough money to retire. There was a suspicious viral outbreak on Europa that killed a lot of people. The footage was doctored by its perpetrators, the Illuminati and the UJC. They placed the blame squarely on a freedom fighter organization called the Outer Way, kinda like the Space IRA, and Danny Nakamura is their leader, pictured here. Danny had boarded them under the assumption that Jacob was carrying another payload of this virus. Danny was correct. Protag decides to open the bloody windows, depressurizing the ship, causing the Charon to break apart, get trapped in Callisto's gravity, and pulled towards the planet's surface. I'm not a science guy or CinemaSins. It looked cool, set the scene, and introduced all our major players in one fell swoop. A great opening, if not much more than a glorified cutscene.
Welcome to Black Iron Prison.
Your induction into Black Iron Prison goes swimmingly. The villains are introduced effortlessly, and your health bar is installed in gruesome fashion. I wish they went a bit harder on the horror here. Being lured into a false sense of security by a supposed authority figure, kidnapped by the police, held against your will, and then branded like cattle should be impactful. Here it's serviceable. It's such a shame that we don't get to see the prison in action. Look at all this fantastic prison break media we have on hand to steal from. Cold water from a hose to disorientate, forced stripping and shaving to dehumanize, full cavity searches to emasculate, the fresh meat walk of shame. Where is any of this? We're dealing with a corporate-owned prison, a militarized prison complex. It's a horror that people are experiencing right now. Draw the parallel, be forceful. Introduce the themes for the plot going forward, not just its players and its pawns. The story doesn't give itself any time to breathe. Slow down and let the people scare themselves. You awake in your cell as if in a dream, mostly because you are, and the game's first motif is introduced, the music box. It's haunting and eye-catching. It was the asset they used to doctor the news footage. Like, we all know why they chose the box, because, music boxes are creepy. Like, that's perfectly fine. But that's it. That's as far as it goes. The music box comes back again, like 5 hours later, in the final act of the game. So, yeah, is it a motif if it shows up like 3 times? It's a weak through line that pays off by the end, but could have been 100 times stronger. You tend to forget about a lot of this game's plot points whilst you're playing. The same thing with Max. He gets two-faced at the start of the game, but comes back infrequently throughout. He only exists to deliver plot and to do this.
Hi.
For a phantom of grief and guilt, Max sure is tardy. His manifestation is a byproduct of the device planted in your spine. It's called the Cranial Optical Recording Engine, or core device. It's a piece of the prison, of black iron, forced into an inmate's body against their will. It's incredibly useful, operating as a comlink, a health bar, and somehow a device that allows you to see into people's memories. It has one side effect: spooky hallucinations. It happens so infrequently that it feels like cut content. By the end of the game, Max is a forgotten memory, and Any connection or guilt felt about his personhood has been smashed, forgotten in a deluge of new game mechanics and more important characters. It's a shame then that he's used as the final arbiter of the game's core moral. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. AKA, what goes around comes back around. AKA, everyone has a choice. If you choose to be selfish, people will get hurt. And karma will catch up with you eventually. You blink and here we are, tutorials ahead. You get to meet Elias. He's a cool Cockney Brit who you can tell was written by an American.
Be that easy, bro.
Yeah, you got the help, alright, bro. Loud and clear, bro.
Holy shit, bro. No, bro. I'm done.
His plan is to do some stuff and release a secret hidden super hacker prisoner locked in a ship called the Shoe. The achievement for getting there is called If the Shoe Fits. Racist. It's solitary confinement. Try and guess who it is. You regroup with Elias, who hasn't been telling you about his escape plans because he doesn't trust you. Why would he? You meet in an airlock and encounter a new zombified Captain Ferris. This is the third time you see him in the entire game, for less than a minute. He spaces you and Elias onto the moon's surface. Oh, and you're both wearing spacesuits, which acts as a +6 inventory space buff and a damage reduction buff, fundamentally changing the way you play the game. I put it here at the end because I didn't even realize it buffed me until the end of the game. There's no fanfare for this upgrade. No music, no dangerous sequence, no foreshadowing, you don't earn it, it's just given to you in a cutscene, and that's that. I also didn't mention where you obtain the grip, which you find just laying around on the floor. You try and find Elias, he dies in your arms, happy to finally be free of Black Iron Prison. His prison sentence was self-defense. I actually really like Elias. His story isn't explored enough and the narrative points it out. He was robbed of his life by Black Iron after his unfortunate circumstances forced him to make unfortunate decisions. He refuses to open up to Jacob. He takes his cards to his grave. Jacob looks like someone fired. It's okay to cry, Jacob. No one's gonna call you a beta on this abandoned moon. Then Danny appears and brutally shivs his core off. Both me and Jacob get big mad. We revisit our old ship's crash site. Danny wants us to open the box containing the evil zombie parasites. Jacob lies to her face by not telling her there's a false bottom, and Max shames us for it by being spooky. Max only appears when Jacob is trying to cover up his guilt. He's a spirit of shame. We call in a ship, the warden shoots it down. Big surprise. Jacob falls a ridiculous distance and survives. It was at this exact moment I checked out of the story. The man is literally invincible. Halfway through, good job keeping up. We land in an abandoned colony called Arcus, Callisto's original colony. Mining families lived and worked under the surface. They dug too deep. They found a gargantuan alien entity, the mother of these creatures. Of course, there was an outbreak. The miners who weren't infected were killed by UJC security, and the whole thing was covered up. You spend a very large amount of this game battling the same enemy over and over again. The blind, who are just like the regular grunt, but blind. It's supposed to be a stealth sequence, but I just killed them all. When you move as fast as an upside down tortoise with no legs, stealth is a nightmare. You also fight Two Head here. He's a boss fight. He dies. He then becomes a normal enemy, but not in the ultra kill, oh I'm a badass sort of way. In the can't believe this guy was a boss sort of way. The sort of, oh god it's him again, there goes all my ammo sort of way. After finding the mother alien, we as players discover that Jacob was actually carrying the parasites all along. Captain Ferris shows up again, this time to be an incredibly easy boss fight. Unfortunately, after you escape, Danny gets infected by a wiggly worm. In pursuit of a cure, they both decide to go up to the warden's tower. Two very helpful and very kind robots teleport Jacob halfway there, back to his cell. After a pretty cool and grueling fight up to the doctor's lab, she dumps a flurry of exposition onto us. Turns out there was someone who survived the original colony. He was infected, but human. The UJC killed him when they were cleansing the colony. Oopsie daisies. He was called Subject 0. The Illuminati's plan is as follows. Build a prison to both cover up the old colony and have a fresh batch of prisoners to experiment on that no one will miss, apart from their friends and families. Use these test subjects to advance the human race by making us able to survive in space and on distant planets. He kind of motions to Jupiter when he says this. So instead of continuing to slowly develop a revolutionary, evolutionary superdrug using the prison as a perfect cover, the Warden got impatient and released the virus, killing everyone, but creating a new Subject Zero, Captain Ferris. Unfortunately, instead of calling him Subject 1 or Subject 0 again, they opt instead to call him Subject Alpha.
It's all my kingdom. It's all yours.
Which is charmingly cheesy and works in its purest sense, but as I am a chronically online asshole, when I heard the Warden, and I quote this, calling Captain Ferris his alpha, I begged him to stop. He didn't. So as we travel up the tower to confront the Warden, Jacob finds himself in Danny's memories, because the core can do that. Max shows up for the third but final time, forces Jacob but more so the players to see the truth. That Jacob and Max were both complicit in the Warden's schemes. Whilst they both knew about the sussy vials, they didn't know exactly what was in them. But they were more than willing to smuggle for money. You can even see that a vial is missing from Jacob's box. This missing vial is the one used to start the outbreak on Europa. And you know what? Screw that. Get your money, King. There's no way he could have known there was a zombie virus in those vials. He probably thought they were space drugs or something. Is it the Uber driver's fault when they deliver cocaine without prior knowledge? If I was in Jacob's situation, I wouldn't question it either. I wouldn't pick up the vial though, leaving my fingerprints everywhere, goddamn. I want to retire sometime in my life. I think not working is the ultimate reward. When you make monetary need the motivation for your working class protagonist, there's a lot of people who are going to go, yeah, he's totally justified, get that bread. He's probably not being paid enough by the UJC anyways. He's in a situation in which he has to take this job. He doesn't even own his own ship. He's not self-employed. He's a transplanetary Amazon driver. Once he realizes this is all his and Max's fault, he gets all sad. The story then goes, you are morally bad for doing this, and solely bear the burden of fixing it. Which is, fine, I suppose. So you talk to the Warden, and he calls Ferris an alpha again. He gives you a big evil speech about choice, and gives you a way out. You don't get to choose what Jacob does here. He says no, obviously. You fight the alpha, kick his butt, he's really easy. Second form, kick his butt, he's really easy. The Warden once again tells you to choose. You don't get to choose. Then you run away from the prison's self-destruct protocol. It looks like this. The slowest getaway imaginable. At the end, you cure Danny and choose to save her life. No doubt she will return the favor in a sequel. She flies up into space with a vial of maggot to hopefully prove to the government that the government is committing crimes against humanity. And then they sequel bait you. Captain Ferris does a funny jump scare, just like in this place, and the game ends. Alright, so that's that. The story's core morals and themes are as follows. If you choose to be bad, make sure to help those you affect. You can always choose between good and bad, even if it means choosing good will lead to your demise. Captain Ferris is an Alpha Bro podcaster. The story's fine, it's fine. It does its thing. Yes, committing crimes / being a rude dude is bad, but the story doesn't attempt to justify its moralizing. It treats Jacob and Max like children in a weird German fairy tale. They do a bad thing and the Wiedergänger turns everyone into zombies. Oopsie daisies. It's a simple moral, and I'm making it sound way worse than it is. The story's not so awful. Flipping to the positive side now, there is something we can all agree on. This game's graphical fidelity is off the chart. The quality of the lighting and graphics are fantastic. Graphics are a culmination of both art design and art quality. Both are really good here. Black Iron is a harrowing place to be trapped in. It's aggressively designed. Everything is cold steel bars and bottomless pits. No one's ever escaped from Black Iron alive, including the guard. Black Iron is such a fantastic location. It's such a shame that it's criminally underused. It's a game about a jailbreak during a zombie apocalypse, but you spend a startlingly short amount of time in jail-based locations. The cells and stinky sewers quickly give way to underground bunkers, cold, desolate tundras, and ancient abandoned colonies. Each are integral in telling the core plot of Callisto as a place, but I sincerely miss the walls of Black Iron, the amazing environments, the interesting architecture, and the joy of learning about how the prison keeps people in by trying to get out. Everything looks great. Every asset and enemy. Unfortunately, this kind of fidelity melts older PCs. They fixed most of the issues they had on launch, and many of these frame rate problems never appeared on consoles. Not saying it was all smooth sailing, but it wasn't nearly as bad. Lighting is on point too. Everything's beautifully lit, with intention and artistry. I rarely had issues finding my way around. They chose not to use darkness as an aspect of the horror here. It's fine. It's not the darkness that scares people, it's what may lurk within. Unfortunately, this fear of the unknown expires fast, as the majority of the game's core enemies are identical. However, I'll talk about this aspect later. Quickly moving on to sound now. The apprehension engine comes up a lot in marketing, positioned as the Callisto Protocol's secret weapon. One never field tested in the realm of video games. It's a Hollywood thing, dreamed up by Mark Corvin and built by Tony Duggan Smith. The apprehension engine has been field tested in a lot of media. It's a cool piece of kit, honestly. A chimera of wood, metal and string, capable of producing some truly horrible sounds. Great for generating a library of assets to be used in mixing and sampling. The apprehension engine is rarely used to deliver actual music, like the composed stuff. It sounds rancid and requires a suite of talented devs to make the most of what the engine can give. It's a competent soundtrack, but there's no real music. Nobody's got Shoot the Tentacles in their Spotify playlist. I didn't even know this game had a soundtrack until now. There isn't a single song in here that stands out. I don't want to argue that all horror games need great music. Not every game needs a safe room soundtrack to spiral to. But there is a sincere lack of contrast in this game's music. It all bleeds together. Let me illustrate my point here. To my ears, these songs sound the same. He has all these tools at his disposal, but struggles to wow both me and many others with what he actually does with these technologies. And there comes that feeling again. One that I can only define as jealousy. The sadness when this game fails to deliver. When I look at others who were so sincerely terrified, the ones who struggled, played for twice as long as I did, the ones who took the time to find all the audio logs in the secret rooms, and the ones who share online with passion and gusto, unafraid to defend this game with their whole chest. Even if I don't always agree with their opinions, finding out what specific things the fans agree on as positive helped me decipher my own criticisms. I recommend all of you do the same, if you would be willing. I'm sure by now you've watched tons of negative reviews. Now try to watch a positive one. It doesn't have to change your opinion, but it'll open you up to how the other side feels, which is invaluable. The scenes in Black Iron are the strongest in the game. It's the time it tries to scare you and it actually kind of works. When the atmosphere is thick and when the enemies and the combat are still fresh. From the Panopticon all the way down to water treatment. Your opponents particularly stand out as being exceptionally well made, yet incredibly bland. They hold the facsimile of intentional design, but don't evolve past their role during gameplay. These monsters are called biophages. They're zombies. That is all. I'm joking, obviously. I don't want to dump on these guys too much. The monsters are fine. They're a culmination of every kind of beastie and freak that existed on media today. They're an alien parasite that transforms the host into an angry monster that wants to kill and infect humanity. Sometimes they merge their biomass together to form stronger, spookier variants. Sometimes they spread their meat out, creating living environments, birthing larvae and other strange and ugly creatures. But at the end of the day, they're zombies. They fight like zombies, they die like zombies. They aren't all that scary, they don't push the envelope, they aren't offensive. Originality has a spice to it that people want. But every horde shooter and survival horror game share the same pool of 10 or so enemy archetypes. Even the most archetypal enemies can be fun to face. So why here is it a problem? Here are my reasons. The biophage are positioned as a neutral third party to the plot's proceedings. They hold absolutely zero relation to the themes of the story. The game lasers in on its narrative. The entire last half chooses to depart from the prison escape and transforms into a tale of repenting for actions regretted. It's about guilt. Which really does work in a macro sense. I don't mind the story at all. It's not bad on its own, but the enemies never change, or have ever been made to match its themes of repentance. They're zombies. Plain dumb zombies. The reason games like Silent Hill stick with us is that almost everything is designed to serve the narrative. Every enemy a manifestation of our protagonist's psyche. Every NPC serving as an emotional and narrative foil. What do the grunts symbolize? The way that inmates are treated like raging monsters even if they are innocent or otherwise kind? Or is it saying that all criminals would act this way given their freedom? Or are they just cool zombies? The warden is the bad guy, our hero is the good guy. They start the story as zombies, and they end the game as zombies, but bigger. If TCP stopped for a second, took itself a bit less seriously, let's have a little bit of fun with its mechanics, no one would be talking about this. It's that lack of charm that makes this game so devoid of appeal. I can't stress this more here than anywhere else in the essay. I'm not scared of the Callisto Protocol. For me, it is truly barren of tension and fear. I really wish it was different. I want to love this game. But I'm running seriously low on copium right now. Why isn't this game clicking with me? As of editing, I figured it out. Or at least my theory. The prison is a copy of Europa, which was a tragedy that Jacob caused. So he now has to endure that same tragedy, except now at the hand of another. It's like a penance, like prison. I still believe that the zombies don't have any relation to the themes of the game. They're just zombies. But the act of creating an outbreak makes thematic sense. How I only realized this a week later baffles me. Am I dumb or is the game bad? Honestly, am I just dumb? This one's called a grunt. He's the basic fella. He goes 1, 2, and you go 1, 2, 3. He goes 1, 2, and you go 1, 2, 3. He goes 1, 2, and you go 1, 2, 3. Sound repetitive? It is. There is zero variety in your opponents during gameplay. The grunt has a number of variations that slightly mix things up. The grunt is your opponent for like 80% of your playtime. We have regular guy, fat guy, on fire guy, blind guy, and really cool helmet cop variant. I actually like the fella. His injuries are really unique. This sort of yellow line of boils and pus. He's the same as regular guy. So obviously changing the grunt to BMI and calling that gameplay variety is a joke, right? Like it's Call of Duty enemy design. But my main issue is that many of these enemies are specialists who only appear during certain sequences. It's really cool when the environment heralds these creatures in. Like when you see goop, you're gonna see grabbers. But this just means the core stock of enemies rarely change. Therefore, the combat rarely changes. You fight only grunts, then grunts and spitters, then only corruptors, then only the blind. Your opponents just don't have that synergy with each other. There isn't a mounting threat, no dangerous combos. They aren't a horde of horrible mutants. You never fight more than 4 at a time. Just kill the spitter, hit the grunts, and do both against the corruptors. Repeat ad nauseum for 8 or so hours, and boom, the game's over. This one's called Big Mouth. He spits the little parasites at you. He actually shakes things up when introduced, adding this sort of tank DPS dynamic to combat. I like it. It's dangerous enough that you have to think before a fight. Picking your targets, and it's so cinematic when you're fighting for your life and desperately trying to figure out a strat to deal with the range attacks, whilst dealing with the grunts, and you're taking hits whilst dodging, desperately trying to find some ground and mountain offensive. Like, this is cool. I'm having fun. I'm on that life or death struggle, that battle of desperation against a superior foe. And the corruptors, the highlight of the game for me. The first jump scare I got hit by and felt like it was actually deserved. They cloak and climb. They're the main enemy in some of my favorite environments. They actually do stuff. Dynamic stuff that isn't scripted. They run away and attack from different angles. They sneak around and fight you in groups. They are honestly scary. And I think their design is just perfect. More encounters like this, please. Let's round off the rest. Bloodworm. A scary surprise enemy. It blends in with the environment, then leaps at you. Do a quick time event or shoot it before it lands to kill. It's used way too much. The surprise is ruined from overuse. They don't deal enough damage to be considered dangerous. Honestly, really cool. But just overused. They're also basically invisible. Give them a creepy but clear sound effect when idle. It'll fill people with so much dread if they can hear it before they see it. Like Prop Hunt. But all the props have knives. Parasite. Minor swarm enemy. They're annoying and only appear a few times in the game. What most people dislike about them is that they're also the game's mimics. Jumping out of chests and lockers to instantly attack you. There isn't any way to tell what lockers contain parasites. You just have to remember. The worst part is, when you run into these things, their chests don't contain anything. So you just get hurt and then continue with your life. These jack-in-the-boxes occupy all the chests in the final stretch. I honestly like this. Really makes you desperate and ups the challenge factor. But other than that, they're just kind of annoying. Like a mosquito. This one one-shot me though for some reason. The blind. Some people might be a bit mad at me for not including the blind here. They're grunts, but blind. They often hide in the walls to jump scare and to encourage you to stealth around, but I think most players just kill them all, considering avoiding enemies is basically impossible. They're real creeps and come running in swarms when you shoot your gun. One of the few enemies in the game that makes you think twice before fighting. Problem is, you can't shoot the tentacles when you fight them, so you essentially have to fight them twice if you're in melee. One beforehand, and once when they mutate. But I didn't necessarily want to include them here, as they are mechanically the same to fight as the common infected. There's just so many of the blind that it appears to change the dynamic, when it really doesn't. Combuster, they explode. Their sound design is really cool, they sound like flesh balloons, and kinda hurts my ears. Any dead bodies that can't become grunts become combusters. That's my theory at least. There's like 12 of them in the entire game. Spoilers ahead here for the bosses. Two Head, a side boss you fight 4 times. They're like the giant trolls in God of War, but without actual mechanics. They walk at you, swing once, then swing again. You dodge or die instantly. You shoot them until they fall over, and let you melee them. When they are reduced to 50% HP, they rip off the dead half of their body and charge you. They attack faster for a short time, and then you kill them. Scary the first time, I don't mind that it one-shots you. It makes the fight actually challenging, and their design looks good. Adequately gory with animations that sell they have the strength of 2 people combined into one. But they appear too frequently, and after the second, the magic's already worn off. And they take way too long to kill. Also, they're the only enemy in the game where you don't actually have to alternate dodges to dodge. Just hold the button down. And the final boss. So Leon Ferris turns into the Alpha. He's a basic boss who swings his fists at you. What makes him unique is he attacks more than 3 times in a row. When he reaches his final form, he summons combustors to help him. So you can throw them into his face and he dies. Other than that, he has the same lazy swipes 2 Head has, but sometimes he spits acid like Big Mouth. He's boring. And finally, the security unit. They look pretty bog standard as far as evil robots go, but a regular looking evil robot is still a cool looking evil robot, you know? They have an instant kill gun attack because guns kill people. They're used as often as 2 Head is, which is not enough for how weak they are. Isn't that weird? 4 or 5 headshots with the basic pistol tends to do the trick. I'm always happy when I see one. It's basically free money. For as imposing as they are, they go down easy. There's never any infighting between the security droids and the zombies, which is a massive shame. According to the wiki, the robots don't see the biophage as enemies, which makes sense if the warden controls them. However, why would the warden want to kill inmates? Wasn't his whole thing to make an alpha out of alive people? The prison's technology went haywire during the outbreak, so it makes sense that they might be feral. Well. All in all, you face a good few opponents. However, they're used so intermittently throughout the game that the loop is boredom into boredom. They're all pretty bog standard as far as mechanics go. The only unique enemy here is the Bloodworm, even though they're just a QTE. I've never seen a monster like this before, so it looks fantastic. Good job. I've spoken around the combat and gameplay for a while, so now's a great time to bring it up. The combat is holding this game up all by itself. It feels great. Dodging feels fantastic when it all falls into place. Mr. Callisto would stomp the boxing circuit. My man is untouchable, which unfortunately is the sort of mechanic that sucks the fear straight out your body. All you gotta do is be walking left or right when an attack comes in, then alternate. If you can't see the attack, you can't dodge it. First of all, it sounds like a programming nightmare, so shout out to the people who actually make the game. The programmers. My respect for the world's coders is immense. You carry all those privileged writers and auteurs on your shoulders. Secondly, it feels fun at first, but quickly becomes boring. Gameplay looks like it's straight from an E3 trailer, when it works. It has a great feel, but little tactical congruity. Oh, and there's a perfect dodge mechanic that's never explained. It's just like a regular input dodge from any other game. Do it at the last second and get slow-mo. You can then follow up this dodge with a powerful strike that launches your opponent. Apparently I did this 10 times for the achievement. Could have fooled me. Once you've mastered the dodging, yes it's that quick, it's time to move on to the melee, the second pillar of the combat system. Once again, melee combat feels great. It's heavy and slow, but it feels like Jacob is putting his entire body into these swings. A complete newbie to combat, trapped in a hell of his own making. He can sever flesh from bone in a single swing, pop arms off with a single swipe, or smash necros a good meter or so with his heavy attack. Which kind of brings these zombies into question, right? Like, are they rotting and gross, easy to break or sever? Or is Jacob just immensely yoked? A guy who's capable of these kind of insane acts of dismemberment with what is essentially an electrified baseball bat. Nah. Ah well. You can't overthink everything, right? If it feels good, looks good, and plays good, then who am I to question Jacob Lee, the arm taker? I know that sounded like sarcasm, but I promise you it's not. Melee is fun. Gore plus crunch equals good. Strangely enough, all the weapons in this game get, like, attachments added to their models when they're upgraded. Like, all the guns and stuff. But the baton doesn't. It doesn't change. I know the colour of the electricity does, but that's it, which is a shame, considering melee is, like, half of the gameplay. I'm worried that a conflict arose during the design process. Like, why is melee combat so limited, but there's 5 different guns that all feel the same? Why isn't this game about desperately fighting zombified criminals with a police baton, a melee-focused game? Why is there no combo variation? No alternative attacks, no baton skills, or even alternate melee weapons? Why are there 2 pistols and 2 shotguns, which basically do the same damn thing, but only 1 type of baton, with 3 attacks? Light, heavy, and this kneecapper I never used. Did some exec come in at the last minute and say, no guns equals no sales? Like, why is the game like this? It can't flesh out any of its mechanics in any meaningful way. Its combat has a lot of tools, but each of these tools are as deep as a puddle. There's a 5th gun, by the way, the 3-round burst assault rifle. It's good, it's a good gun. It has 20 rounds in it. Let's count along. 20, 17, 14, 11, 8, 5, 2. This 3-round burster doesn't have a mag that's a multiple of 3. Even when it gets its capacity upgrade, it still has 1 shot left. Why? The guns are, well, they definitely shoot. That's for sure. Now let's talk about the grip. The thing that shines some light upon this shallow mess. You get the grip pretty unceremoniously early in the game. It's telekinesis. You can manipulate everything in your environment, including your opponents. And I don't mean using their stray limbs as projectiles like in Dead Space. You hurl their whole bodies. And the grip really fills out its place with gusto. It's always useful. Applicable in every scenario. You can use it to start and continue combos. Manipulate hazards in the environment. And by hazards I mean this one explosive barrel. Hurl your enemies into each other for a stun. Or into traps for an instant kill. It's fun and it never gets old. When you feel like you've got the combat down, the grip is there to raise the skill ceiling even higher. It has its weird moments, like, why would I want to pick up a random object when I can, pick up the entire guy? Or certain scenes which are supposed to be an extreme challenge, but I just call them grip segments, because they're trivialized by a few grip batteries and a high sensitivity. TCP's combat is great. It's repetitive, sure, but once you break free of the survival horror tag and start playing the game in the most counterintuitive way possible, looking online for Twitter combos, and watching speedruns, you start to play the game for its combat instead of its horror. And man, the game's seriously fun. Moving like Rocky, smashing skulls and using the grip to hurl your opponents around even in the odds. It's a scramble. You make up plans as you go. Use the guns to interrupt your enemies, giving yourself advantage, breaking that I hit, you hit cycle. Hitting up that second playthrough, the one you're seeing now, man, you can pull off some godly stuff. This game has combos. Its combat is deep, fun, and frenetic. But worst of all, empowering. If you've got it down, you're immortal. A half-upgraded pistol and a few baton skills and you're set for the rest of the game. Honestly, I'd be totally fine with less guns and more melee. That's where all the sauce is. Pistol for weak spots and stuns, baton for the combos and meat, grip for the environmental kills and combo extenders. Once you disregard the fear, you've mastered the prison and anything it could ever throw at you. This, unfortunately, also includes the survival part of the horror. It's such a bold-faced shame that in order to enjoy the game for what it is, you have to stop playing it the way the devs intended. It's honestly kinda sad. I really hope its creators see that they have a fantastic action horror title on their hands and lean into it. Survival horror TCP is not. It's Resi 5, not Resi 1. But what even is survival horror anyways? Amnesia, Resident Evil, The Callisto Protocol, Alone in the Dark, Silent Hill. All these games are survival horror titles. I know because corporate told me so. So, I guess survival horror is defined as the game's scary and the combat's dangerous. Is Grounded a survival horror game then? The Long Dark? Is Hunt Showdown the first ever survival horror extraction shooter? In my opinion, the only reason the Callisto Protocol is called a survival horror game is because calling it anything else would feel weird. It would detract from the narrative that's being told through the advertising and distance it from Dead Space, which would in turn reduce the available market and then in turn the sales of the game. It's not malicious, it's just money. I feel like the only reason people are comparing this game to Dead Space is because the advertisers did it first. Do we really want to endlessly compare games to each other? I suppose it's useful for critics and buyers. This game is like Dead Space 2. It is. It's an action horror title. It has spaceships and spooky monsters and no HUD, but that's it. It's surface deep, and I'm worried that the Callisto Protocol will never be able to stand up on its own. I think it has in some senses. I know there's a lot of people out there now who don't comment, who don't review, who don't post, that enjoy this game, and I think there's a lot of them. But I also know there's a lot of people angry with this game, with its sneaky, overindulgent marketing, its broken PC release, its reliance on, hey, remember Dead Space? This guy co-created Dead Space. It's going to be just like Dead Space. I don't think the Callisto Protocol is the worst game in the world. I know I've been harsh, but there's a game here that people can enjoy. I just don't think it's worth its asking price. Or worth its budget. It's just lacking. It's okay. If you want to drop $60 on an okay game, that is entirely up to you. Once again, not sarcasm. It's clear that those who work the trenches on TCP have a lot of talent, but their management missed the mark. The Callisto Protocol feels more like a product than art. I hate that I spent so much on a game that was barely complete on launch. It really doesn't feel like the Callisto Protocol is firing on all cylinders. The game is missing so many things that I think makes video games video games. But what hasn't worked for me is worked for a myriad of others. A game that can stir up so much passion with so many people must have something to offer. When I think about the Callisto Protocol, I don't think about the characters or the story. I think about the hordes of creatives and freelancers who bled to make this game as good as it is. I finished my second playthrough. This time I watched the credits. Okay, I'm lying. I went to the bathroom, but when I came back, I looked over the OBS. 10 minutes of credits so far. I sat there and watched for another 5. Sunk cost fallacy and all that. Right at the end, as my patience wore thin, a special thanks rolled in. To my family, Barbara, Nicole, Kyle and Caitlin, thank you for your support. Love you. Team, thank you so much. Crafton, deeply appreciate your support and belief in us. Glenn Schofield, thanks to my wife Oren for putting up with another move. Christopher Koga, this man moved his entire life to pursue this game, a game I hate so much. Thank you to all my family and friends for your love and support during the project. I hope you enjoy the game. Adam G. Magleby. And finally, I want to thank my family for being my support and being there for the hard times. I am thankful for being given a chance to follow my dream job as a gamer. Phil Favretto, you're a gamer? There were 100 others. 136, actually. These 136 humans have poured themselves into this game, and I can see it. I can see the hopes and passions and hours of brutal crunch. I read these confessions and my sappy ass can't stop thinking about their lives, what they did to get here, how they feel after reading the reviews. Had they learned to be proud of the work and not the product? These are the people living a dream I once had as a child. A dream that still sparks within me. Pondering upon the lives of others isn't just weird and nosy. It has a name. It's a phenomena called sonder. It's a feeling, a noun, and is defined as follows. A profound feeling of realizing that everyone, including strangers passing in the street, have lives as complex as one's own, which they are constantly living. Why is it just now I'm feeling sonderous? That to see the evidence of human existence and to read their words of thanks and confessions of hardship, hit me like 136 bricks to the face. It is something truly selfish on my part to deny the critical part of my brain, the part that wants to come crashing down upon each and every fault and crack in this product with a mighty force. A force that part of me deems justifiable. A force that is justifiable. The game came out unfinished. A botched PC launch that was nearly universally panned. Glenn's employees were pulling 15-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week, a pace that is sacrificial at best and suicidal at worst. The employees don't deserve our hatred. I hope they got paid big money in overtime. Crunch is both a failure of management and a failure of morals. I'm sure they can take the criticism. They aren't children. But I understand what it is like to create. Not just here, but in my regular life, and damn. I think I've been a bit too mean. But there's also a part of me that feels like I haven't been mean enough. If this was a truly bad and evil game, like the new Battlefield, I'd spot it from a mile away. But there's something here. Maybe it's the passion of the developers. Maybe it's the passion of its fans. It's just, I've not been able to stop riding since the game came out. I made this video, watched 100 reviews from every side and every angle, and I came up blank. Listen to me or not, I just want you to know that I support the Callisto protocol, but I don't trust its money, I don't trust its advertisements, and I can't see past the bogus claim that its director is the smartest, bestest designer in the world, and that's why you should buy his product. The directors are responsible for every developer and every hour of crunch worked. I wish we could trust these big budget games to deliver. But as long as these quadruple A games rule the market, it's going to happen again and again. The Callisto's PC launch was unacceptable. They knew it was bad and they sent it anyways. We gotta develop the skills to cut through opinion, and we gotta know ourselves enough to understand when a game is perfect for us. Criticism be damned. I value the Callisto protocol because it made me keep thinking about it. I think it's fine, it's an okay game. It's just missing that spark for me. That moment when emotion and gameplay combine into what video games truly are. The Callisto protocol is a game full of heart and creative spirit, but it does the same things that everyone else does, and the things it tries to make for itself aren't fleshed out enough to carry the game. It's a game that looks good and sounds good. It's a peacock, studying its fantastic RTX lighting and a harrowing soundscape, but is otherwise lacking in taste or use. The Callisto protocol isn't the worst game ever made, but it isn't worth its asking price or its review scores. It commits the worst sin a video game can make. It's just a bit mid. Thank you for watching.